Hey everyone, Ty here from Grayscale, co-founder and CEO. Grayscale is a texting and automation platform. We work with great brands like Amazon Pharmacy, who we're talking with today, just about how they're leaning into leveraging SMS and automation to help transform their hiring process and some of the impact they're seeing. With me, I've got Zach on the recruiting team at Amazon Pharmacy. Zach, I'd love to have you just spend a moment kind of talking briefly about your role and how you fit into the Amazon Pharmacy recruiting process.
Yeah, of course. And thank you, Ty, for having me today. As Ty said, my name is Zach Tucker. I'm a recruiter for Amazon Pharmacy, been with Amazon Pharmacy for over 3.5 years now. And I focus on the high volume hiring side of things, mostly focused on our customer service team, which hires at a higher volume than our pharmacy side, getting into 100 or more, 150 or more in a month's time frame. And then my co-recruiters on my team, they're more focused on our pharmacy operations, which is technically also considered high volume, just a little bit less of volume than what I do for customer service. So whole team is focused on high volume hiring and basically constantly hiring candidates to come fulfill our mission at Amazon Pharmacy.
Perfect. Thanks, Zach. Well, I want to kind of start off and kind of drill in a little bit on the kind of state of the talent acquisition function pre-Grayscale and sort of the environment you were in when we first started talking. Can you kind of maybe paint a picture for the audience as far as sort of what current state was, before you started implementing some technology in the process?
For sure. And I have an interesting perspective with this since I've been with Amazon Pharmacy for so long. Back when I started in this role, everything we did was manual. And our number one goal, our number one leadership principle or core value at Amazon in general is customer obsession. And for us in recruitment, our customers are our candidates. And we want to give each of them a positive experience. A positive candidate experience is one of our main concerns in recruitment. But at a high volume, that's very difficult. And pre-implementation of Grayscale, it took a great deal of time on our end to provide that personal touch with every single candidate. And nothing was automated on our end. So we had to manually reach out via email or call people on our personal phones. We weren't texting at all at the time, but calling, leaving voicemails, sending emails, and doing all that we could to create that positive experience. But also in our recruitment process, we need responses from our candidates. We have an assessment that they need to take. We have other parts of the process, completing a background check, sending in information that is absolutely critical for them to get hired. So again, it just took a lot of time on our end, and it took a lot of recruiters to hire at the volume that we were and still are hiring at, just in order to create that positive experience. And it just wasn't scalable, especially now with launching as Amazon Pharmacy and with our growth projections towards the end of this year and into the coming years. We would have had to have hired way too many recruiters in order to create that positive experience and to get everyone hired at the end of the day.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. So it sounds like the environment was one that in order to scale the process any further required throwing more bodies at the problem, right? Which was not, it sounds like wasn't really an option. And so we're at a point where I had to start looking at how technology could help with efficiencies to really help with the throughput, with all the growth that you were experiencing, while still kind of creating that high touch experience that your candidates being your customers, right? Like needing to kind of scale that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically our main goal of all of 2020 was automation. We wanted to automate our process, streamline it, and just take away this manual work that we knew a technology or a software could assist us with. It just, from our end, from my end as a recruiter, I felt like I was doing things that would have been in practice many years ago before we had the technology and software that we do today. And just to give some numbers, I mean, it took me and my co-recruiter, Jaden, it took us a significant amount of time to hire typically 12 people. We'd hire 12 people per training class for customer service before last year. And it took both of us. She was full-time. I was between full-time and part-time. And it took our full weeks and our full days in our weeks to get those training classes hired. Whereas now I by myself can hire and have hired like back last winter over 150 people by myself, just because our process is now much more streamlined and automated, and that's in large part thanks to Grayscale.
Awesome. Well, let's maybe use that as a sort of springboard and sort of what the process looks like today and sort of what the impact has been as you've started kind of leaning into technology and in part through this partnership. Can you kind of speak to sort of what the process looks like a bit more in today's environment?
Yeah, absolutely. So at least for me with customer service and the high volume that I hire at, we call it lights out hiring now, meaning that there's not much personal touch from me, yet the candidate is still receiving that personal touch experience which creates a positive candidate experience at the end of the day for them and satisfies our core value of customer obsession, which directly translates to candidate obsession. So it's freed up a lot of time for me to be able to participate in more high level and meaningful projects. And then from a candidate's perspective, they feel like they have that personal connection and communication with us on a daily basis. And with the implementation of Grayscale, it just took a lot of worry out of my day today, because I always wanted to provide the candidates with everything I could give them. But with automation specifically, it's one of our favorite features from Grayscale. It takes the headache out of having to manually go through every candidate and sending them that manual communication. With automations and Grayscale, when a candidate reaches a certain point in our recruitment process, whether it's very early on, they just hit the apply button, they just finished their application, a Grayscale automates a text to them, which in the past we would have to go manually check where they were in the recruitment process and then manually send them that communication. So Grayscale takes the headache out of that, as well as freeing up all that manual time, like I said, to now participate in other projects and meetings at a more meaningful level. So I think that's the biggest thing with our process now is kind of having that lights out approach of a candidate can apply, they can complete their assessment, they can complete their interview if necessary. And then even when they're getting hired through their background check and through other processes that are specific to Amazon Pharmacy, they get that automated contact and communication. And likewise, they can respond to us directly if a question comes up or something's broken, a link's not working, or something expired. They can then reach back to us directly. And I mean, let's be honest, texting is it's way more with the times than an email or even a phone call. A lot of people prefer just to shoot off a text. It's really easy no matter what you're currently doing. So it's definitely streamlined communication and increased candidate engagement.
Got it. Yeah. And so obviously leveraging a channel like SMS has made a real impact. You mentioned kind of really leaning into automations. And I want for those viewers that are like tuning in right now, I want to kind of get a little bit granular with you for a moment on some tactical ways that they could be thinking about leveraging automation in their process in kind of real ways, and walk me through sort of, because I know it was an evolution for you all, and partly, while I'm speaking to Zach was very instrumental in setting up a lot of these automations for Amazon Pharmacy for their recruiting process. And so talking about where you saw the biggest impact from an automation standpoint, and if you were, for those of you that are just starting down this path, what's kind of a way to kind of crawl, walk, run, so to speak, down this journey of automating the candidate communication?
Yeah. So like I said earlier, our main goal of 2020 was to automate, but it was also to streamline in the sense that I'm in Salt Lake City, Utah, but we have recruiters in Manchester, New Hampshire, and Austin, Texas, and Phoenix, Arizona, and in Florida and New York. And we have locations all over the country. And we didn't want two recruiters sending a different message to candidates. We wanted to streamline that communication and have it the same across the board, whether you're a candidate in Texas or in Utah or in Florida. And so that was kind of the first step with automations. Was I was able to create templates that our whole team used for their Grayscale automated texts. And then the biggest thing was, one, creating those templates, but then using them for our candidates as they progress throughout our recruitment process. And our ATS is very stage driven. So, and obviously every company has maybe has a different ATS, but typically every ATS has different stages or levels of the process that a candidate goes through from the time they apply to the time that they're hired. And with our Grayscale automations, the second a candidate hits one stage, they're sent a text or a text that's applicable to that stage. So they have one for right when they hit apply and complete their application. They have one for when they need to fill out their background check if we're hiring them, and then one for a drug test if applicable based on the location they're starting in. A big thing for us too is at my high volume, we don't conduct interviews. We just do an online assessment, but the candidate has to complete that assessment in order for us to consider them further. And in the past, that was a big headache of trying to manually email them or call them and asking them to complete that assessment. But with Grayscale automations, the second they reach that stage, they're sent a text. And then, you know, if a day or two passes and it's still not complete, they're sent a reminder text or a nudge. So it's just really taken out that manual involvement from us. And it really gives the candidate the personal touch of being communicated with in every single step along the way before they get hired. Whereas in the past, you know, maybe one or two candidates would hear from us in the beginning, they'd complete their interview, but then they wouldn't hear anything until the day they were hired, and they maybe wouldn't show up that day because they thought the job went away or we went away or something, because we just weren't able to provide that personal touch for every single candidate when hiring at such a high volume. So automations definitely help streamline our communication in the sense that we're all using the same templates. And then it's also helped the candidates progress quicker throughout our recruitment process, more efficiently. And it's definitely driven up engagement from the candidate recruiter perspective.
That's great. Yeah. And to put kind of a fine point on it, I'd love to sort of hear your perspectives. We have a lot of viewers that are kind of coming into this discussion doing very high volume recruiting, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it be for, an hourly roles or warehouse hiring or call center, or, you fill in the blank. But dealing in high volume and needing to create a scalable, process, would love to hear your perspective on really like what has like, how scalable is some of this in your mind, being able to automate the communication? You kind of touched on some of the capabilities that now, you're able to recruit or hire, in the hundreds versus, a dozen or so previously. But in your mind, is there sort of a threshold on how far this scales? And I'd love to get your perspective there on really kind of the value behind some of this for high volume recruiting.
Yeah, that's a great question. And to give some perspective, we always say at Amazon that when we're looking at going with a different ATS, we always tell them that we tend to break things because we hire at such a high volume. We tend to break our ATSs all the time, and ours does break all the time. But on the flip side, Grayscale is never broken, at least that I've seen. So in my mind, Grayscale is very scalable, no matter how big we get, and no matter how high of a volume we hire at. I'm looking at our numbers right now on my other screen, but we've had thousands and thousands of automations sent out. And what's super nice too is when those automations are sent out, it's automatically linked with our ATS. So we see that in the candidate's profile that they did receive that message. And then we can kind of see the communication they've received throughout their recruitment process. But yeah, I mean, I've never seen an issue with scalability, which I can't say that about other things that we've used. I break things all the time because a lot of softwares, and other things that are supposed to be automated really aren't at the end of the day when I'm hiring so many people and reaching out to thousands of applicants. But Grayscale hasn't broken for me, at least as far as I've been able to tell. I've never seen an issue. And so I would imagine as we continue to grow and as other companies grow and hire at a high volume, that it'll continue to be scalable. I guess that's up to you, Ty, but hopefully it'll stay that way.
Let's hope. Yeah. Well, and going a little bit further, I mean, if as you think about you being, one recruiter, what would you say, like, as as hiring continues to scale up, like, do you have a sense for like what the sort of new threshold is that a recruiter can handle at Amazon Pharmacy? As far as the number of hires in a given month or so.
Yeah.
Can you really just put that in perspective? As how far does this ramp in your mind from a volume standpoint?
For sure. So I know the standard at Amazon, which is more warehouse focused, they typically have one recruiter that is, the ratio is supposed to be 1 to 1,000, so one recruiter for 1,000 associates. Pharmacy is obviously a little bit different with accreditations and licenses and stuff, but as far as I've been told, we're going to be held to that same standard, and that's why we push so big on automations, and why we ultimately partnered with Grayscale was to help us reach that goal. And as far as a communication perspective, I mean, I feel like I could reach out to well beyond 1,000 people with Grayscale, just because the only real workload on my end to use Grayscale is just setting it up in the back end, setting up a template, which doesn't take much time at all, and then just setting up the automation of essentially when Grayscale is supposed to send out the text, which also doesn't take much time at all. And then the rest is history. It's just monitoring it and using the different reporting tools, and being able to see how many candidates were engaged over a week span and stuff like that. So I feel like I could go well beyond that from a communication perspective. And obviously it's different when it comes down to actually hiring them. But from a communication perspective, one person could handle into the thousands as far as scalability goes.
Into the thousands as far as candidates that you're engaging with, that you're kind of progressing through the hiring process at any one given time. Is that right?
Yeah. And I mean, I guess I should clarify, even though I said I've hired only like 150 to 200 in a month, the amount of people I'm communicating with to get that number is in the thousands. And we get thousands of applicants the second we open a job, just with the Amazon name, obviously. So the amount of candidates that goes into hiring 150 to 200 is in the thousands already. Just because, I'm capped out at how many people I can hire. I would hire all those people if I could, all into the thousands, but yeah, I mean, the scale is already there to communicate with the thousands of people in order to hire the hundreds. We just kind of have to funnel them down at some point.
Yep, that makes sense. Well, I see a few questions rolling in around automation, and just I sense a little bit of pushback as far as like, you're mentioning creating a high touch candidate experience. We're talking about automation. I think there's some general skepticism as it relates to automation, and really, can you create a high touch experience versus one that just feels colder for candidates? It's really only benefiting the company, right? And I'd love to hear you speak to that. Like, what is really the impact of automating the process been to your candidate experience, if you were to step back and sort of think about it through the lens of the candidate, which I know you do?
Yeah, totally. So before we had Grayscale, we had a pretty bad response rate, in the sense that we got a ton of applicants. The top of our funnel was huge, in the thousands, but it got really narrow really fast, because like I said earlier, we need them to complete certain things. They need to complete an assessment, and then after that, a background check and other things. And if they don't, we simply cannot hire them. It's impossible. So once we implemented Grayscale, those numbers went way up. Our engagement numbers and all of our data looked a lot better, in the sense that the funnel was getting wider. And at the end of the day, I can only hire as many people as the business needs, but I had a lot more options, just because, like I said earlier, I didn't have to take the time in my day to manually reach out via email to every single person. Whereas with an automation, that I knew that was going out, and then I could take my time responding to people that responded to the automation, who had questions or who didn't receive a link or an email. So it freed up my time in order to create more of a personal experience. Whereas some people, they just need that initial first text, and they're good to go. But then others, they respond and they need some more help or some clarification. And the way Grayscale is organized, in the sense that I have an inbox that looks like an email inbox, or even just my phone, with text messages. And it's so easy to manage, in the sense that you see when someone responds and you're able to respond to them. And so it really, really increased engagement. And that was one of our main issues, was that funnel problem of getting so many people to apply, but then none of them were really useful after that, because we couldn't move forward with them. They weren't completing the other steps of our process. So that's been the biggest thing. Hopefully that answered that question. That's what I've seen the most of, is just being able to ensure that our candidates go through the necessary steps in order for them to get hired. Whereas in the past, they weren't. They were applying, but then they turned into just being archived as, didn't work out, wasn't responsive, or we never heard back from them, or whatever it was.
Yeah. I think maybe one good distinction for the audience too, just to call out that this is automation, but it's not chatbot driven automation. This is every text message, every communication with candidates you're engaged with, that you're responsible for, looks like it's a crafted, personalized text message coming from you, right? At each step in the process, that is just kind of happening on your behalf, right? And so it feels personalized, and then you're able to kind of jump in when when candidates have additional questions, or reply back for questions or clarification. You can jump in and give that follow-up touch. But otherwise, things are just kind of moving on your behalf. Basically just giving you the ability to sort of do what you'd already be doing, just at scale, right?
Yeah, for sure. And that was one of the key things we loved about Grayscale, was that these texts are coming to the candidate from a local phone number with a local area code, just to make it look more personal. And like I said before, we're nationwide, and the candidate in New Hampshire is getting a text from a Utah number. It causes confusion. It maybe lowers the likeliness that they will respond. So that was huge for us, as well as before Grayscale, we would use our personal phones as our work phones, which wasn't the most ideal business model for us, just because, of course, we didn't mind reaching out to candidates and creating a positive experience. But if they weren't available, then they would call or text back maybe late in the evening or on a weekend, when we're not working. And it's to no fault of their own. I mean, they have no clue, and they just want to get in touch with us. So Grayscale kind of centralizes all that candidate communication and takes it away from our personal cell phones, which is really nice. Yet it still shows up as a local phone number that's reaching out to the candidate, which is huge for us and for them to build that trust and ultimately create that positive candidate experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. And want to field one more question before we wrap here from the audience. So just regarding the lift to implement Grayscale. So we've talked about a lot of things that can be introduced, right? Leveraging texting as a channel, automating communication throughout the process. Talk to me about the level of effort in implementing Grayscale, and what that looked like.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it was so new to us to using texting. We never ever texted in the past. We always wanted it, but we were always so phone call and email driven. So learning kind of how to use Grayscale, it wasn't that hard. I mean, we all obviously text in our personal lives, and using the Grayscale app and The Grayscale website was super easy and user-friendly and very intuitive. I was kind of the main person on the team that took over implementing Grayscale for all of us. And it didn't take long. I mean, again, it's so user-friendly and it's really hard to get confused on Grayscale. I mean, it's pretty simple, very simple interface. And then of course, I've always loved the ability to communicate with you, Ty, and with others at Grayscale when questions do come up. The responsiveness and customer service has been top notch. Definitely one of our best integrations. When typically, like I said, we tend to break softwares and it's hard to get a hold of someone that can actually help. So the customer service with Grayscale has been fantastic when questions did come up. And I mean, Ty can speak to this. In the beginning, I did reach out quite a bit with questions, but it wasn't like how to use Grayscale questions. It was more like, hey, is Grayscale going to be able to do this in the future? Can it do this in the future? And with time and new updates and releases, Grayscale has been able to do those things that I initially asked about, which is another thing we love, that Grayscale continues to be improved upon. So I mean, I would say within a day or two of signing up with Grayscale, it was already implemented. We were already turning on automations and sending out bulk text messages and utilizing all the features of engaging with our candidates in a much more streamlined way.
Perfect. Well, we're about out of time. So I'll say, Zach, thank you so much for spending some time with us. Been a webinar and learn a bit your journey and taking some time.
Of course. Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
Care.